Hello viewers, my name is Adam,
And I'm Aaron.
and this is Seeking Media Productions. I can't believe we've done nothing of Christopher Nolan related.
It slept.
Yeah, and up until now, or like one of the mostly anticipated films to come out, hopefully by the time we're talking about Tenet, mind you, a movie that we really have a trailer bait for, and we don't know. We just don't know. But until Tenet is released, and by the time we hopefully get to review that movie, let's take a look back at a few films that Christopher Nolan is highly known for.
We're going to be going over the Dark Knight trilogy.
And he begins with essentially a movie that's called
Batman Begins.
So, Batman Begins is the origin story for Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. And it takes a lot of inspiration from the graphic novel from Frank Miller, Batman Year One, and where he goes back to taking Batman to a much more serious look. And for Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan had a very, he was starting to have a reputation of doing these psychological thrillers. And from Memento to Insomnia, Batman Begins, I'll say from the start of this trilogy, is his most Nolan-y film from all three movies. One being the main character always having such an obsession of some sort. With Bruce Wayne's case, his obsession of getting justice and taking back Gotham. The idea of time.
Yeah, there's so many scenes in which he goes backwards and forwards from one parts of his early years, other parts where he's just training with somebody, and then back forward to where it's present day when he's actually crime fighting as the Cape Crusader himself.
Though that mixing at the time of playing with it is it's the first half of the film, and up there to that point it's more of a more linear structure. And also something that's very present in other Nolan films is a noir type setting. Now, this Gotham is a more practical yet realistic take than what people normally or originally saw Batman.
Instead, this is a Batman that utilizes military grade weaponry and incorporates it into his arsenal. Of course, the most comic book aesthetic that comes into this film is the fact that he's running around in a suit that resembles a bat. But even in that sense, it's something that was made practically.
And in addition to some of the Nolan themes that is incorporated into Batman Begins, another one that is very prominent in this film and is different from the other three movies is the concept of fear, in a way how it is used as a motivational method for Bruce Wayne as Batman, as well as a particular villain in this film. Yeah, and so let's talk about characters for a second. Back to Bruce Wayne. Christian Bale makes for a very unique version of Bruce Wayne that audiences as of yet had, at least up until this point, haven't seen in a Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I think this is a particular usage on how sophisticated he is, but also I think Christian Bale really captures that brooding aspect that really emphasizes his drive towards what he does as the Cape Crusader. Excellent version on that one half of Bruce Wayne. I feel as though there are still other parts to him that I feel that the movie kind of doesn't do a good enough job emphasizing or diving into. That whole other mask that Bruce Wayne puts on for the public. I feel as though there could have been more to be done with it. At least can't really ever see this
philanthropy.
Word. Yeah, philanthropy.
But also, most importantly, the actual Batman persona.
Yeah.
With the idea of fear, this is like the one weird times where we do see Batman very frightening his enemies, as well as much more smaller criminals.
But of course, Batman is the only person in this film. We also have other supporting casts. Of course, there will be no Batman Bruce Wayne if we don't have an excellent Alfred to be with him. Yeah. And of course, Nolan had to bring his A game and probably one of his favorite actors to work with.
And that's Michael Kane. Michael Kane, he brings a lot of heart to the role of Alfred Pennyworth. And the rest of the supporting cast is also some top-notch talent, with Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox.
Now, I gotta admit, I didn't really understand who this character was, because I am very versed in the Batman mythos, but Lucius Fox is just one of those characters that didn't always, come to mind, or at least it wasn't always fully utilized, and this film really does utilize him very well.
As much as I want to highlight Lucius Fox in his role, I think he does overplay him, especially with his sacrifices other aspects that totally makes Batman a much more of a competent version that he usually is in the comic book. But also rounding out some of the talented supporting cast members is Gary Oldman as Lieutenant James Gordon, and I think. And like an original character that's developed for the movie, like sort of love interest, is the character of Rachel Dawes, who's a lawyer, someone who's like very connected to Bruce Wayne's past. And this set of trilogy, she's played by Katie Holmes in this movie, and
I thought she was good.
But
of course, let's go into what we really all want to talk about, that rogues gallery that Batman's that's famous for, and they bring in two of his heavy hitters.
For this one, you have Scarecrow, played by we mentioned Jonathan Crane. We also are introduced to Carmen Falcone in this film as well, which helps bring back that Batman Year One aesthetic. But we also introduced another big heavy hitter, or at least an organization in that matter, which is called the League of Shadows. The way that they decided to balance out the use of the antagonists in this film is that they use the League of Shadows in this case as as part of Batman's origins, and that is one of the many people or one of the many groups of things that he came across during his journey. I like that you introduced them, and I think for the sake of plotting for his purposes, especially a group of villains who you eventually later on in the trilogy meet up again, I feel as though their role in this film in particular should have ended in the first act.
Yeah, I feel as though they probably overplayed their welcome, and I feel as though with everything else that this film had going on, it probably didn't have much else left to do. But of course, that's one part that they didn't do well enough for them. They do, however, do well enough for the character of Scarecrow. I really enjoy Cillian Murphy's take on this character. He was born to play that role.
But to wrap things up for Batman Begins, I wanted to show some spotlights on the production side. We'll go, like we said, this is a very much more practical, realistic take on Gotham, and in the sense that it also reflects well on Christopher Nolan's filmography, because he likes to at least aim to always want to do as much stuff in camera. And so much of this film is practically done with the sets, with the look of Gotham being very gritty and dirty. But this being a superhero film as well, you got some action. Unfortunately enough, because this is Nolan's first action movie, he very stumbles and misses the mark on a lot of the parts here.
Yeah, there's so many places where he should have just especially when you look at fight scenes, too many of the fight scenes are just there's too fast, or there's not enough focus on it, or it's
very choppy in the editing department. But what ties most of all this film together, it has to be the music.
Oh God, I love the music.
I know, it's for this one being done by Hans Zimmer and James Howard. They were able to craft a sound for The Dark Knight that's very influential through multiple medias.
It's still going through my mind. I can still hear it right now.
And for all of this purpose, from all what we said for Batman Begins, we still think that it's a good film 15 years after its release. On with The Dark Knight.
I mean, this is probably the quintessential film for so many comic book nerds out there. It's not funny.
I believe this is the film that made him the brand, because after this point, every movie is essentially slapped on with the Christopher Nolan name. He is his brand after this film.
I mean, you thought that he had problems trying to live up to the expectations with the first Batman movie and who Batman was in that sense. There was an infinite amount of tension going around here, thinking about who he was going to have cast and how he was going to present such a phenomenal character such as the Joker in this movie.
Well, luckily enough, Heath Ledger was able to, the crew, everyone who was able to help make this film was They're the craft of Joker that was stood the test of time and basically reshaped the whole dynamic of how people see superhero films to date.
Mm-hmm.
You have Christopher Nolan who's taking basically the inspiration from the very first issue of Batman issue 1, way back when Joker was established, and exploring it into this modern domestic terrorist of a character.
Now, of course, when in this particular film, Joker is just he's nobody. He comes from nowhere. He has no background. He has no direct ties to anybody in general. He's just some type of crazed loon nut running around and causing problems until he starts escalating this situation further and further until it's literally nowhere anybody can run or hide from.
And with the Dark Knight, through the Batman's cat and mouse game with the Joker, they was able to open up the criminal world and in a much more down to earth, gritty look. And you have this scenario where it's a true morality test, where not only just the criminals what they should do with the Batman, what Batman should do with the Joker, and what basically the rest of Gotham should do, but a very high stakes scenario that the Joker put everyone through. And it really makes a very nail biting, very tension, blockbuster like filmmaking that
I think
sells.
I was on the edge. Literally, that go cut Hollywood and movie cliche. I was literally on the edge of my seat the entire time while watching this film because you really didn't know where anything was going to go. You didn't know how this was going to end.
So let's talk more about the characters. Not much, like so much of the characters from Batman Begins, thankfully, do carry back over to here. With Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne,
it's more the same. He was as good as he was in Batman Begins. He was just as good in this one. They do give him a little bit of a increased role when it comes to trying to get into his detective roots, but not nearly as much as I would want him and the character to really delve into.
Essentially, the role of Batman is slightly. We see more Batman action, but the role of he takes personally. It's actually a little bit step backwards.
Yeah, this is mostly a Bruce Wayne Joker story than it is a Batman Joker story.
Especially with so many of the other supporting roles, their acts and their story arcs are a lot more elevated this time around than what Batman Begins was basically telling Bruce Wayne's story as becoming Batman.
Yeah. Going back on, you see Chris. In this one, is it Commissioner Gordon now?
Yeah, he eventually in this movie he does become.
He becomes Commissioner, and then what a way how he became Commissioner Gordon in that way too.
Moral decision for Lucius Fox, and then in the climax, and Michael Kane being the very supportive person.
As he said, some people just want to see the world burn,
and it's very true.
Especially when you look at Heath Ledger and the Joker. Wow.
And even despite the unfortunate fate and of the actual actor, I still feel as though that
he definitely deserved his Academy Award. Yeah, he deserved that Oscar.
And another highlight tale of basically the central figure of this tale of morality that the Dark Knight encompasses is the character of Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart.
I've really felt for this character. And it's easy to understand why. They don't do necessarily the split personality aspect of him, because even though that's something we really should have saw, but they do the aspect of the play on that word the play on words that Christopher Nolan likes to work with. In this case, the Two-Face alley aspect. Although I don't know necessarily how they didn't really stress that part about it. In fact, unfortunate enough as much as we want to praise this film, how they handled the Two-Face character towards the very end is something that a little bit let down, especially for what they could have done in a future installment. But from a production standpoint, The Dark Knight, it does show a very good progression of Nolan as a filmmaker. Thankfully to the point that, holy crap, what is this tool? IMAX. It opens up the world to an extent that you can actually see it from a God's eye view in a way. Like you're actually getting to see things that you probably didn't get to focus on in one aspect, and it's blown up in your face in this particular film. in these scenes.
Now, he has still some trouble with the fight choreography because I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't feel as though he ever, and I'm just gonna say it right now, he never really gets that high cutting edge action that I really wanted to see Batman do as far as hand to hand combat. He never really gets there.
Yeah, but The Dark Knight do showcase the most standout action sequence in the whole entire trilogy, which is that nice good chase sequence from within Gotham and the Joker's. It's some very next level stuff, especially with all that being done practically.
Oh wow, yeah.
Good. And yet Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score continues to be a very high point in this trilogy.
It is. So I love it.
For all that, The Dark Knight deserves its great rating.
But that throws us into the final film in this trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises. My God, does it feel as though
Nobody wanted to be part of this film franchise anymore.
Nope, not at all. The story felt rushed. Characters went in directions that really they should never have even considered going down, and there's just too much mess. There's too many things going on that didn't really need to be going on at the same time.
So, the plot, the League of Assassins or League of Shadows in this universe is brought back as the main antagonist. Structurally speaking, Nolan takes inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns, in which Bruce Wayne, after a huge hiatus, he comes back as Batman. And then they take an element from the Nightfall storyline, where you introduce Bane, and one of the most main thing that Bane is known for is
breaking the bat.
And thus basically cripples Bruce Wayne and for long periods of time until he's able to come back up. And then you have essentially what makes the inspiration from what most of the film is a no man's land storyline where Gotham is in the lockdown situation. I think for all intents and purposes, from all the actors are doing, they still do a good job as acting their characters. You do feel the weight of Bruce Wayne failure in a sense in this film.
But then again, you got some other characters such as the fiendishly ferocious and deadly, but at the same time just love her, Selena Kyle.
Anne Hathaway is brought on to portray this character, most loved, fan favorite in the comic books, and she does a nice good job of showing in this world, especially in the very hyper practical world that Nolan creates, Catwoman is still Catwoman. Unfortunately enough, as much as Anne Hathaway does for this character, she's very, very limited utilized in this film. To the point that it's supporting, and saying that she's a supporting character is saying a lot. Anne Hathaway's screen time in this role could have been better suited for developing another important female character in this film as well. Yeah. I won't say saying who she is because it's not really worth it, especially how it's handled, but it should have been handled for that character. And Bane,
he's quotable.
Tom Hardy, he creates a Bane that his inspiration is being felt even outside this film. So I'll say that's something that's credible for the Christopher Nolan and team for doing. But the mere that he's relegated to a henchman in this film.
That's like the bigger twist. Like, he's not even the big bad. He's just the person who's working for the big bad. He's just the muscle behind him. It's
which is the big departure from him being his own man from what people usually saw. On a production standpoint, this is the most biggest of scope that Nolan has done. And also for the fact, despite how messy this film is, this is essentially the most Batman of the entire trilogy, especially for a more visual point. With the use of Catwoman, looking at Catwoman, you're taking so much of the storylines from Batman comic books that are being present.
I just feel as though they just handled them poorly. In my opinion, that's what earns this a pretty bad movie, in my opinion.
I would say, for the benefit of the doubt, especially from much more worse films that DC have done, no matter what Hans Zimmer's score, this is the one that he really does knock out of the park. And you can tell that he is not the one who's at fault for why this film.
He's not the one at fault. The actors aren't the one at fault. They did their jobs.
I'm going to say, despite all the effort, it's still an okay film, but it is a letdown for the whole trilogy.
But that's all we got for you guys. Please, if you like this video, like, share, and subscribe. Hit us on our other notifications. That little bell at the bottom.
Links below in the description. Make sure you check out our next installment of the Christopher Nolan series up until Tenet, which will be Inception, and the third one will be something that's going to come at you until then. So there you go. My name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
And this has been a Sticky Media Productions.
See you guys.